Okay, so in the third semester, we have studied about the rise of the Maratha power, and in that we have studied how Chhatrapati Shivaji has started literally from scratch. He was son of Adil Shahi Noble Shahaji, and then he started his experiment of Swaraj. And then we have studied how, in his experiment of establishing a Swaraj, he came in conflict with Adil Shah and then Mughal, and after that he also came in conflict with Siddhis of Zanzira, and then with after Shivaji's death we have said Sambhaji and then Rajaram. And then of course after Rajaram's death, his wife, his widowed wife Tarabai, she gave leadership to the Marathas, and then Marathas fought against the Mughal. Now we will be going further and studying the next portion of this Maratha history. So it starts from that phase of a little bit of information about Tarabai's leadership of Marathas and her fight against the Mughals. I'll share this syllabus with you. I hope you have gone through syllabus. Well, okay. Can you see me, and can you see me the word file as well?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay,
Yes,
fine.
sir.
So, okay, now see what happened is when Tarabai was fighting and Rajaram was fighting. Rajaram, he became Chhatrapati after immediately after the capturing of Sambhaji in 1689, and later on he escapes from Raigad and takes shelter in Jinji. This we all studied. Now, when he escaped from Raigad and took shelter at Jinji, Raigad was attacked by Mughal, and Sambhaji's wife Esubai as well as his son, whose name was actually Shivaji, but then he's generally known in history as Shahu. They were captured. So when Rajaram and Tarabai from 1689 to 1707, when they were fighting against the Mughal, Rajaram first from 1689 to 1700, and later on Tarabai from 1700 to 1707, when they were fighting against the Mughal and the Marathas, they were fighting under the leadership against the Mughal. Shahu was being brought up in the Mughal camp, and he was a small kid when in fact, only small, I think 1.5 year old. He was captured, but then later on after the death of Aurangzeb, he was released from the Mughal captivity. That of course we'll be studying in detail. So this Shahu, he comes to Maharashtra, and but now Tarabai, who has effectively given leadership to the Marathas, she is not willing to let the reins of power go from her hand. And then there is a kind of civil war among the Marathas, Shahu on the one side and Tarabai on the other side. But in this struggle, Shahu comes out as successful, and then Shahu becomes Chhatrapati. So in the first unit, this Shahu becoming Chhatrapati is the first topic. The second topic is, as the Mughals were ruling for a very long period after Babur's time, like 1526, first battle of Panipat, and then second battle of Panipat, when Akbar has strengthened the foundation, and they have under Aurangzeb they have made a very extensive empire. So Mughal authority has a kind of, it became a kind of sacrosanct. It became a kind of authority figure. So this in second topic, the important thing that happens is that Balaji Vishwanath, one of the noble who was on the side of Shahu, he goes to Delhi along with certain Marathas. He helps, he somehow intervenes in the politics at Delhi court, and in return of this service of the Marathas, they are given sanad by the Mughal emperor. Sanad is a sanction letter, authority that you can be now collect chauth, that is a tax. You can collect Sardesh Mukhi, that is additional tax from the six subas of Deccan. And in a way, the Sanad is a kind of acknowledgement of Shahu as the ruler of Maratha. But here there is an important turn. Important turn here is that Shivaji and Sambhaji and they all rule as a kind of very independent ruler. But here now we see that, technically speaking, at least if not practically, technically, Shahu is ruling now after getting permission from the Mughal emperor. So technically, he is becoming a vessel. In practice, they rarely followed it, and Marathas we find attacking the Mughal territory. So in a way, Marathas were attacking the territories of their own masters. But that is how the complexities of this medieval politics. It was not very streamlined. In any case, politics is now also it is not very streamlined. It is pretty complex, and you can understand during those days when we had no written rules and regulation, and it was a, the might is the right, that sort of thing. But nevertheless, this acquisition of Sanat by Balaji Vishwanath, which made Shahu as a kind of acknowledged leader of the Marathas, has given important authority, has strengthened Shahu's prestige. Incidentally, when Shahu was requesting for Sanat, it was Tarabai also who was in opposite camp. She was also requesting for Sanat, and finally it was, as Shahu comes out successfully. And now the next important episode in the Maratha history, in fact, from here it is now the expansion of the Maratha power becomes very important episodes in the Indian history. That is expansion of Maratha power in northern India. This person Balaji Vishwanath, who has acquired this sanat for Shahu, he dies immediately after that. In 17 yes, 1719 he acquired sanat, and 1720 he dies. Now, at the time of his death, now who will become Peshwa after his death? That was quite contested position, and there were people in the court of Shahu who wanted to become Peshwa, and they had more experience. But this young person, his son, who Bajirao first, who is known in this as Bajirao first, or simply Bajirao, there were some people who supported this, and they said this young man is quite dashing, and his father has done a lot of service to the Maratha kingdom, a lot of service to Shahu. We will be studying about that, in the first topic, how Balaji Vishwanath in fact played a very important role in making Shahu as Chhatrapati. There were a certain faction in the court who were in favor of making Bajirao as Peshwa. They said that as his father Balaji Vishwanath has done a lot of service to Maratha, and he in fact could not enjoy the fruit of his power. He could not enjoy it. So let us give the reins of power to Bajirao. And Bajirao, he takes over the power, and then under his leadership, the Marathas, they started expanding into the northerly direction. Under Bajirao, Marathas army, they go to Malwa, and then they go to Gujarat, and then they go to Rajasthan, and even Bajirao once had courage to raid Delhi also, but then he suddenly withdraws because the tactics followed by him were guerrilla tactics, that is sudden attack. But nevertheless, we will be studying about this. So the first thing in the first unit, we will be studying how Shahu becomes Chhatrapati. So that gives a kind of stability to the Maratha chaotic political situation, and then acquisition of Sanad, another important episode, which gives a kind of sanction, a moral authority to Shahu to become the ruler of the Marathas, and then expansion under the Peshwa Bajirao in North India. Now, Peshwa Bajirao, he was Peshwa from 1720 to 1740. He became Peshwa at the age of 20 and dies at the age of 40. So after him, again there was a problem who will become Peshwa, but nevertheless Shahu, he decides in favor of Balaji Bajirao. Balaji Bajirao is son of Bajirao, and who is generally known in history as Nana Sahib Peshwa. So this Nana Sahib, he becomes the next Peshwa, first Peshwa in this line, like Balaji Vishwanath line. Peshwa was also post during Shivaji's period, but they were not very effective. But now we slowly find that during the period of Bajirao first, especially, the power now started shifting gradually from Satara. Satara was capital of the Marathas, where Chhatrapati Shah used to sit, and now Peshwa Bajirao has made Pune as his the place of residence. So the power now shifted slowly from Satara to Pune. and Nanasaheb Peshwa, he becomes Peshwa now, and under him the expansion towards north it continues. Even now the Marathas they take the responsibility of protecting Delhi. They have an agreement with the Mughal emperor, and then they go beyond Delhi. They go and invade Punjab and then Multan, which is in Pakistan now. In fact, they conquered Multan, and there was a Subedar. There was a Subedar of Multan who was Maratha. So Maratha power it reaches at its zenith. It is considered as the Maratha. There is a very famous saying in the Maratha history, "Atke par jhande fadkawle." That means the Marathas have taken their flag beyond Atak. Now Atak is a region which is a boundary between present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. So you can understand that starting from Maharashtra, the Marathas have very rapidly expanded towards north, and they have taken this responsibility of protecting the Mughal emperor. But this rapid expansion, responsibility of protecting the Mughal emperor, had brought them into conflict with Ahmad Shah Abdali. Ahmad Shah Abdali was one of the most capable general, most capable ruler of his time, and he has fought numerous wars. He was ruler of Afghanistan, and he is a very respectable historical personality in Afghanistan. If you have seen that movie Panipat, though in Indian history he is considered as a kind of villain because he fought against the Indian and he raided and killed large number of people. But he was also a kind of ambitious person who wanted to expand towards India. He conquered Punjab and the Marathas reconquered it, and then his son was Taimur was driven away from Punjab, and this has angered him. So he comes to India with a huge army, and in order to establish the supremacy over northern India, supremacy over Delhi, these two power they clashes at Panipat. Ahmad Shah Abdali from Afghanistan and the Marathas from the south, and there is a third battle of Panipat, which Marathas end up losing, leading to the killing of large number of Marathas. We will be studying this third battle of Panipat, which is a very important event in the Maratha history. Now, after this loss of battle at Panipat, loss of life, there was a kind of disorganized. The administration became quite disorganized. But nevertheless, in this battle, the Marathas they inflicted heavy casualty on Ahmad Shah Abdali as well, and Ahmad Shah Abdali had no courage to stay back in India. There were problems in his homeland, and then he finally have a kind of trust with Peshwa. He says later that whatever happened has happened, and you can have the person of your choice on the throne of Mughal, and I'll better go back to Afghanistan, and he goes back. But nevertheless, the Marathas' prestige has suffered a severe blow because of this loss of third battle of Panipat. But it was young Madhavrao. You know what happened is when the Marathas lost that third battle of Panipat, there were few people from Peshwa's family, like Bhausaheb Peshwa, who was cousin of Nanasaheb Peshwa, and Nanasaheb Peshwa's own son, Vishwas Rao, who was only 17 years old. They both of them dies in that battle of Panipat, and this gives a rude shock to Nanasaheb Peshwa. He becomes sick and then he dies in 1761 itself within few months of this battle. Now, as he dies, his eldest son Vishwasrao has already killed in the battle, and now the responsibility of becoming Peshwa comes to Madhavrao, his second son, and he was very young, 16, 17 years old. He becomes Peshwa, but he proves himself to be very capable. He rises to the challenge, and in spite of his young age, he takes an effective step in the restoration of the Maratha power in North India, and he is very aptly assisted by Madhavrao Sindhia and Nana Fadnavis, the two important historical personality in the Maratha history. And this Madhavrao Mahadaji Sindhia, Mahadaji Sindhia. He reconquers northern India. He reconquers Delhi, and again the Delhi comes under in the hands of the Marathas for a few years. But this was the probably the last glorious Peshwa, Madhavrao. And after that, we find that there is a conflict in the Peshwa. Conflict was there earlier, but now Madhura Peshwa, because of a lot of work, he becomes sick and he dies quite an young age at Thevur near Pune. And after his death, his younger brother Narayan Rao, he becomes Peshwa, but he was not very capable person. And now his uncle Raghunath Rao, he indulges into into conspiracy, and in that conspiracy, unfortunately, Narayan Rao Peshwa is murdered. That is one of the very tragic episode in the Maratha history when uncle gets his own nephew murdered for the power. Though Raghunath Rao becomes Peshwa, the Maratha nobles they oppose him. They say, "Ki, we don't want this kind of person who kills his own nephew for the sake of the power, for the sake of Peshwa's Gadi." And during this conflict, when all this thing was happening, Battle of Panipat was happening, Madhavra was restoring power. The Britishers were slowly increasing their power in India. They conquered Bengal. See, 1761, and just 4 years before that, we have Battle of Palasi, 1757, where which is considered as the beginning of the British rule in India. And after 4 years after that, we have 1761 when the Marathas they lost the Battle of Panipat. Ahmad Shah Abdali goes back, and there is a kind of political vacuum in the northern India. And the Britishers they took advantage of it. They rallied together, and in 1764, see, 3 years after the Battle of Panipat, at the Battle of Buxar, they defeats the Mughal Emperor, the Nawab of Oudh, and the Nawab of Bengal. So all these three powers were defeated, and the Bengal got the Britishers got their right to Diwani, that is a collection right to collect taxes from Bengal. So when the Maratha Empire was going through all these ups and downs, the Britishers they slowly strengthened themselves, and they were looking for an opportunity to intervene into in the Maratha Empire, because that was the strongest empire that they had to reckon with now. And at the same when they were looking for an opportunity, they got an opportunity after the death of Madhavrao Peshwa, as there was no conflict between the Raghunath Rao and the other noble who did not wanted Raghunath Rao to become Peshwa. They in fact wanted Narayan Rao's posthumous son should be made Peshwa, who is known as Savai Madhavrao. And during this conflict, Raghunath Rao is defeated, and he runs away to Britishers, and he signs an agreement with the Britishers, and with that the British enter into the Maratha Empire, and now they slowly encroach on the Maratha territory. Then you know later on, as Savai Madhavrao also dies, Raghunath Rao's son, Bajirao II, he becomes Peshwa. And generally, there is, of course, controversy. Generally, it is believed that he was not a very capable person. And he could not, he was not in a position, he did not have adequate capacity to pull the Marathas Sardar together and withheld the empire. And during this time, we find that the Marathas they slowly lose to the Britishers. There were three Anglo-Marathas war. First war was won by the Marathas because Maratha was still the power to reckon with. Second remained undecided, and in the third Anglo-Maratha war, which was fought in 1818, the Marathas were decisively defeated by the Britishers. And how this Maratha empire comes to an end in 1818. It starts with the experiment of Swarajya around 1657 with Shivaji, and then it goes through lot of phases. Shivaji's fight, his establishment, then Sambhaji's conflict against the Mughal, and then Rajaram, Tarabai, then Shahu, then there is a civil war, and then the expansion towards north, expansion towards south as well, which we are not studying, expansion towards north. And then the Battle of Panipat, Maratha reaches the zenith of their power. They goes up to the Afghanistan boundary, and then they have to withdraw after the Battle of Panipat. But there is again attempt of restoration. But meanwhile, the another political star was rising on the horizon, political horizon of India, that is British. And they being very clever, technically more advanced, and more united, they take advantage one after another. They try to enter into the Maratha Empire, and finally they succeed in defeating the Marathas. So this is a general political structure of the Maratha history. Some of it we have already studied till the time of Tarabai, and Shahu and Peshwa will be studying in these two units, first and second unit. And third unit is generally devoted to administration. Maratha Confederation, how it was. It was a loosely kind of confederation. It was not a very streamlined kind of thing. the Maratha Sardars, they had a tendency to become independent and not to listen to the Peshwa if Peshwa is not strong enough. Even Peshwa had to sometimes fight against his own Sardar, like Bajirao Peshwa has to fight against Dabhade, who was in fact Senapati of the Marathas. Then we will be studying about civil and judicial administration, then the military administration, and then in the fourth unit we'll be studying about the trade and commerce, social and economic condition, art and architecture of that period. So that is a general overview of the Maratha expansion of the Maratha power. So if you have any doubts so far, you can ask me. uh, yes.
Sir,
Yes.
the Barabhai Mandal was the Britishers, but then Robert Clive, I guess he intervened in between. I remember
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were talking to it once in our class. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, probably when I taught you, I used to teach you that another paper also, na? India under the British rule, probably, right?
Sir.
During your first
Hmm.
semester, and in that there is this Anglo-Maratha wars. So those kind of evidences, those kind of incidences will come when we'll be discussing about the Anglo-Maratha war, because the basic reason behind this Anglo-Maratha war is running away of Raghunath Rao to Britishers, and the Britishers they come in support of Raghunath Rao, and from this side the Barabhai they rises, and they end up defeating the Britishers. All right, but initially, nevertheless, as you mentioned, there were certain British administrators who were not in favor of. Fighting against the Marathas, they understood that Marathas are still forced to reckon with. They're still very strong, and we will end up losing the war. So, what you are referring might be related to that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. When?
Sir, there is some kind of disturbance.
Acha, my voice is not clearly audible to you.
No, sir, your voice is audible, but there some kind of static noise. It's ringing rhythmically. I
Okay.
don't know.
Okay. Is it my cooler that is disturbing you? Just a minute. Hold on. I'll
Sir,
switch off
it
my.
disappeared. Sir, the static noise disappeared.
Now it's okay. It's clearly audible now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Fine. I'll share this. Acha, are you able to see PPT?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to see PPT and me both now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So this is the first topic, and as I told you in the introduction, uh, this is over. Shahu, as he was captured. He was born to Sambhaji and Esubai in 1682, and in 1689 he was captured along with his mother. So he was around 7 years old, not 1.5 years, as I told you earlier, and he was arrested by Mughal and Esubai when Raigad was captured in 1689 by the Mughal, and then he lived a very long time in Aurangzeb's camp. 1707 he was released, so 7 and 11, that is around 18 years. So that 7 years boy plus 18, he grows up to be quite an young man of 26, 27 years. Now somehow, as this child was captured and his father was mercilessly killed by Aurangzeb, in fact Aurangzeb's daughter Jinatunnisa, she had a kind of sympathy to this child, and she used to treat him like her own son. She was a married daughter of Aurangzeb, and it was through her initiative that his marriage was arranged in the Mughal camp itself. He was married to the some of the daughters of some of the Maratha noble who were in service of the Mughal, and Aurangzeb, in fact, he wanted to convert him to Islam, But it was Aurangzeb's daughter who intervened, because Shahu was not willing, his mother was not willing to convert to Islam, and it was through her intervention that he remained Hindu. But in place of him, two Maratha nobles had to be converted to Islam. Now, Aurangzeb, he somehow, at the end of his life, he was gradually realizing that it is very difficult to win a war against the Marathas. So he wanted to create a decision among the Marathas, and with that intention, he wanted to release. He said, "Okay, fine. You also go and." Some, he planned that probably some of the Marathas will align with Shahu and there will be a civil war. But Shahu, he acted very diplomatically. He said, "Ki, you know, Rajaram, who is fighting against the Mughal. Rajaram is our enemy. That is what he used to say. He has appropriated the throne, and it's better you defeat him first, and then you yourself make me the ruler of the Marathas." So diplomatically, they saved their life, and there were few attempts from the Maratha side also to free Shahu, but it was not successful. And then later on, during this war against the Marathas, Aurangzeb dies in February 1707. And now, as they had a tradition, Mughal emperor, that after the death of the emperor, usually his sons used to fight for the throne, and whoever comes out successfully, mostly after killing his own brothers, he will become an emperor, and that is what was now going to happen. Azam Shah, who was with Aurangzeb now, starts his march towards north, and Aurangzeb's another son who was in north, he arranges his army and he starts coming to south. And now Azam Shah, as he started toward north, he also took Shahu and Esubai along with him. And there were many noble who requested Azam Shah to release Shahu. And as they were going away from Maharashtra towards north, Shahu was really becoming very uncomfortable. And at Daroha in May 1707, Shahu, he escapes from the Mughal camp. But his mother Isubai and his half brother, that is, the son born to the maid from Sambhaji, he remained in the Mughal camp. Now, there is a bit of debate about Shahu's escape. Was it a release or was it an escape? And what role Zinatun Nisa had. Zinatun Nisa, who was quite fond of Shahu as like her own son. See, interesting, throws away very, very, very interesting episode. Aurangzeb, he mercilessly kills Sambhaji, but Sambhaji's son become a kind of fond child of Aurangzeb's own daughter. And in fact, some Aurangzeb also took to the liking of Shahu, who was quite genial and very decent kind of boy. Well, coming back to this escape, it is believed by the historian that this Azam Shah, he gave his tactical consent. He did not give open permission. He gave his tactical consent through somebody, that okay, you let Shahu go and Mughal army will not pursue as we are busy in fighting. Because he also had his understanding. He also had his plan that if Shahu goes to Maharashtra, at least some of the Maratha noble will side with Shahu, some of the Maratha noble who are fighting with Tarabai, and probably there will be civil war, and that will lead to the reduction of the Maratha power. And Jinatunnisa from her side also probably told Shahu that instead of waiting for the formal sanction of your release, it's better you run away. Nothing is going to happen now. Now my brother is engaged in the civil war. So he escapes from from a place near Bhopal, that is Daroha near Bhopal, and then he marched towards to a south. And the first person to welcome Shahu as the ruler of Maratha was Mohan Singh Rawal. He was a ruler at Badwani, which is at the bank of Narmada, and he was somehow supporting the Maratha cause, because at the end of this Aurangzeb's period, when the Marathas, they started becoming stronger and stronger, and they started attacking the northern India, including Malwa. It was Mohan Singh Rawal who helped the Marathas, and he helped. Then when Shah came, this Mohan Singh Rawal, he welcomes him, he helps him with money and forces, and then. This I already told. 1704, Nemaji Shinde, when he invaded Malwa, it was Mohan Singh Rawal who helped him. Well, And Shahu somehow, when he came to that Badwani, he gave an impression to the Maratha Sardar in the south, in the Maharashtra, and to everybody else that he has escaped with the sanction of the emperor. So the Mughal emperor has acknowledged him as the ruler of the Marathas, and this has enabled many Marathas to join him. Well, now he corresponded with Tarabai as Tarabai was leading the Maratha forces. He said, "Ki okay," and he treated her with lot of respect. And he said, "Ki okay, you please retire with honorably, and we will I'll give all the support so that you can lead a retired life." Now the Maratha camp was divided. Tarabai took a stand that the kingdom that was established by Shivaji has lost by Sambhaji. Raigad was captured, and the whole Maratha territory, except a few part of Konkan, it was occupied by the Mughal forces. And it was Rajaram who, in fact, recreated a new kingdom. And so the legitimate inheritor of this kingdom is Rajaram's son Shivaji, that is Tarabai's son. His name was also Shivaji, who is known in history as Shivaji II. Though Shahu's name was also Shivaji, as I have already told you, but he is generally not called as Shivaji, but he is called Shahu. And interestingly, the Shahu name was given to him by Aurangzeb. He used to call his grandfather Sambhaji as a kind of rebel, and Shahu is a word which is indicative of a person of genial nature. But that Shahu name, it struck him, and he is known in history as Shahu. Well, fine. Now, Tarabai, she was quite attached to the power. She was not willing to let the reins of power go from her hand. But in tradition, generally, it is the elder house who is generally considered as a person suitable to become the ruler. And as Sambhaji was the eldest son, so now Sambhaji's son should become a ruler. And in fact, till the time Rajaram was alive up till 1700, he used to always say that it is the Shahu who is the legitimate ruler, and I am just fighting on his behalf. But Tarabai was not willing to take that, and she, being quite attached to the power, she became quite an arrogant, and she started, spreading rumors about Shahu, that Shahu is not really a son of Sambhaji. He is a kind of fraud person. But there were a number of Maratha Sardars who were earlier working with Mughal, now joining with Marathas, and there used to be coming and going of the Maratha Sardar. So many Maratha Sardars, they have seen Shahu in the Mughal camp. So nobody was willing to uh, take by this argument of Tarabai. But she started opposing Shahu, and she was fearing that probably my Maratha Sardar will leave me and join Shahu. So she used to compel them to take a oath on the on the name of the god, or sit in the temple, or pick up Bhel Bhandara on the from the Shivalinga. Shivalinga is worshipped by Hindu, and on that the bale is that is a bale is a plant, and those leaves are being used at the time of the worship of Shiva. It was a tradition. It was a belief that once you pick up those bale from the Shiva Linga, and if you take a oath, you should, ideally speaking, should stick to your oath. And she used to compel those people to take that kind of oath, or keep your hand on the milk and rice. Cooked rice and milk is considered as a pious food, which is generally offered as a prasadam. So keep your hand on the boiled rice and milk, and take a oath that you will not leave me. So the many Sardar, they took that kind of oath, coming under the pressure of Tarabai. But then they did not like this kind of force, and they neither like Tarabai's propaganda, false propaganda, that Shahu is not really son of Sambhaji, and she was by nature a bit haughty lady. Now Shahu from Badwani, he comes to Ahmednagar, and from Ahmednagar, he reaches to Khandesh near Ahmednagar, and near Ahmednagar, Shahu has done one thing. He visited grave of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb has died in Maharashtra, and near to Ahmednagar at Kuldabad, there is a very simple grave of Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb was also a very complex personality. He wanted to extend the empire, but personally he lived a very simple life. So his simple grave, and Shahu, he visited that grave. He prayed there. Even took out his slipper at a long distance. He walked barefoot. So that kind of respect that is given to the dead emperor has also created a favorable impression about Shahu in the minds of the Mughal nobility. And now the Maratha Sardar, they were in a dilemma. Some of them were loyal to Tarabai, and Tarabai was forcing them to take the oath on God. But some of them were inclined towards Shahu and did not really wanted this civil war should take place. Now here comes the very important role of Balaji Vishwanath. Balaji Vishwanath was a person who was playing an important role during this struggle against the Mughal. And Balaji Vishwanath, he met many people. He communicated with the people, and he convinced them that. It is the Shahu who is the legitimate ruler of the Marathas, and we should support him. Well, now this correspondence with Tarabai Shahu, he came to Ahmednagar, and from Ahmednagar he started correspondence with Tarabai as well as with other Maratha noble, requesting them to join as well as requesting Tarabai to retire. And this gesture on the part of Shahu, kind of reconciliation, attempt of reconciliation, is liked by the Marathas. Even at the time, he thought that okay, instead of getting into conflict with um, my aunt, why not to rule from Ahmednagar itself? But Satara was the capital of Marathas, and it was still in the hands of Tarabai. And people advise him, until unless you have capital in your hand, people will not acknowledge you as Chhatrapati. Now, Tarabai's position was that Tarabai had a lot of her position was quite weak in comparison to Shahu. Shahu, who was 26, 27-year old, son of the Sambhaji, many Marathas supported him, and Tarabai was being haughty. She has disappointed, displeased some of the Maratha Sardar, and Tarabai's son Shivaji too. He was only 11 years old, and there was also belief. There was also rumor that he is not mentally sound. So that has considerably weakened her position, and in contrast, Tarabai's haughty nature, Shahu's attempt of reconciliation was liked by many people. And Tarabai used to tell the Marathas that go and kill Shahu, go and finish off some Shahu. That kind of aggression was also not liked by the Marathas, and that is the reason we find that with the effort of this person Bahaji Vishwanath, with his diplomacy, he goes and meet Maratha Sardar. Significant number of Maratha Sardar, they joins hands with Shahu. Like there were Purandare, Balaji Vishwanath of course joins, Nemaji Shinde, Haibatrao Nimbalkar, and the very important support come from two brothers who were quite respectable in the Maratha confederation, or among the Marathas, that is Parsoji and Sabaji Bhosle. They were expanding. They were from basically from the Yavatmal district village, and they were expanding their kingdom towards Warad, that is the region where we are staying now, Vidarbha, and later on their descendant became the ruler of Maratha. So these two brothers, they also supported Shahu. Even they had they dine with Shahu. Sharing a food from the same plate is an acknowledgement that this person is acknowledged as a person of equal caste. Hindu society is quite caste ridden. So in a way, when they dine with Shahu from the same plate, Tarabai's claim that Shahu is a fraud person. He is not son of Sambhaji. Nobody was willing to believe her anymore. Well, now what happened as near to Ahmednagar, the conflict was going on. They were still Tarabai was having still large many people who were supporting her cause. And near Ahmednagar, Shahu's men were attacked from a village called there was a village near to Ahmednagar, and from that village, Shahu's men were attacked. Now Shahu's forces they retaliated, and during this conflict, the Patil, the ruler, the headman of the village, Shahaji Lokhande, he was killed, and his wife, uh, she had an infant son, and they of course surrendered after that, and then she came with her son to Shahu and said that now his father is no more. I request you for mercy. You take this child and take care of him as he is now fatherless. Shahu, he was moved by the gesture of this lady. She takes that child and she adopts that child as his own son. And as the conquest have started very recently, he names him as Fateh Singh. Now, this gesture of reconciliation, taking the son of your enemy as your own son, and this kindness, this had again made Shahu quite popular. This chivalry made him quite popular among the Marathas, and then gradually we find that large number of Marathas, they started shifting their loyalty from Tarabai to Shahu. But what has sealed really the fate of Tarabai, and what has finally made Shahu as Chhatrapati of the Marathas, is this important battle of Khed, which was fought in October of 1707. Now he made his position as Ahmednagar secure, and now both the sides, they started preparing for war. Now the very important person, the key person who has turned the tide in favor of Shahu further, is Dhanaji Jadhav. Dhanaji Jadhav was a veteran of cavalry warfare. He fought long war against Aurangzeb, and very respectable person. And but Tarabai was not willing to let him go, and she was constantly asking him that you should fight against Shahu, you should fight against Shahu. But it was Balaji Vishwanath who understood that it is Dhanaji Jadhav is the key factor, and he goes meets him. And now Dhanaji Jadhav, though apparently remained with Tarabai, from the heart of his heart he was in support of Shahu, and the things were now arranged what is going to happen in the battle. Now from Tarabai's side, Dhanaji Jadhav as a Senapati came to fight against Shahu. Pratinidhi and some other noble came from Shahu's army. They came, and both the side, they came across each other at a village called Khed. And now, just as the battle was about to begin, Thanaji Jadhav, he goes to Shahu, respects him. You know, mujra, that is a kind of salute those medieval nobility used to use. They were taken from Persia. In fact, Mughal nobility, the Sultan and Mughal, they brought it to India, and then it has percolated. So they do the mujra, and then his complete army that is led by Dhanaji Jadhav, they did not take part in the war. Now, there was a person called Parshuram Panta Pratinidhi who was fighting on the side of Tarabai. He has taken an oath. He does fight. He fight on the side of Tarabai, but then he was defeated by these Bhosles, Parsoji Bhosle and Chimnaji Damodar, who were supporting Shahu. And the significant portion of Tarabai remains mid spectator, who were led by Dhanaji Jadhav. Pratinidhi was defeated by these two Maratha Sardar from the side of Shahu, Parsoji Bhosle and Chimnaji Damodar, and Pratinidhi has to run away. He is defeated. He runs away to save his life, and he takes shelter in the fort of Satara. And after this battle, Shahu, he assumed the title Kshatriya Kulavantas Raja Shahu Chhatrapati. And after this, large number of Maratha Sardar, they join Shahu, because now he has established himself as a good commander. Diplomatically also, he was supported by a very able person like Balaji Vishwanath. And Dhanaji Jadhav, who was very respectable cavalry commander with having a huge force under his command, has now joined with Shao. So now the things were definitely decided. So it is the Battle of Khed that has finally decided that Shahu is going to be Chhatrapati now. And Tarabai was having a lot of disadvantage now, as already narrated. Her son Shivaji was quite young, 11-year-old, and it was believed that he is not mentally sound. And she took shelter in Pannala just before the war. But from Shahu's side, it was Shahu who was there present on the battlefield, and the presence of the king, it does matter. It inspires the people. And just before that, before the battle, the diplomacy of Balaji Vishwanath had also played an important role in turning the people to switch their allegiance from Tarabai to Shahu. Then Balaji Vishwanath. Apart from Balaji Vishwanath, there was one more person called Khandobar Lal. He also played an important role in turning the Sardar in favor of Shahu. And many Marathas, they were not in favor of this conflict. And except Tarabai, the people were not in favor of this conflict. Within the Tarabai's camp also, there were certain conflicts. There was a person, Ramchandra Panta Amatya and Parshuram Panta Pratinidhi. So here, Parshuram Panta Pratinidhi has worked under Ramchandra Panta Amatya, but now he was becoming more important under Tarabai, and they had a kind of ego clashes. Ramchandra Panta Amatya has also favored Shahu, from his heart. He returned later to Shahu, and this was not liked by Tarabai. And in fact, Ramchandra Panta Amatya, who wrote Ajnapatra, if you remember, we have studied his Ajnapatra in the last semester, in the third semester. So this Ramchandra Panta Amatya, he was put under arrest by Tarabai. But now she lost the Battle of Khed, and after the Battle of Khed, she understood that it is a Ramchandra Panta Amatya who is a person having a capacity to lead, and she releases him. And
Sir, when was Battle of Khed fought?
Not 7 होती शायद sir.
yeah, I think it is restored now. It is able to see me. Hello.
No, sir, we can only see the PPT.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, yeah. Sir, we can. You're visible now.
I'm
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah, sir.
okay. Okay. The electricity chali gayi thi. So let us go ahead now. Well, okay. Now
Sir,
so
I wanted to ask something.
yes. Please go ahead.
Sir,
Go ahead.
Battle of Khed, when was it fought?
Yeah, Battle of Khed. I'll tell you once again. In 1707. 12 October 1707.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Alright, alright.
Yes,
So
sir.
this is a battle had Shastab Shahu and and before that a lot of diplomatic effort by Balaji Vishwanath and Khandoballa both. Well, uh, Ramchandra Panta Amatya, by Tarabai, he is now, and through Ramchandra Panta Amatya, Tarabai asked Ramchandra Panta Amatya, you try to turn Dhanaji Jadhav towards our side because he is an important military commander, but it did not really work because by this time, most of the people they became supporter of Shahu. And there are certain activities after the Khed. Shahu, after the Battle of Khed, he goes and meet a person who was known as a holy man, Barve, and this has again created favorable impression about Shahu. Then at Rohida, there is a fort called Rohida, and there was a person called Shankarji Narayan, and the Shankarji Narayan has taken an oath to remain loyal to Tarabai. But now he sees that everything is turning in favor of Shahu, and Shahu sends later. He sends his army first, and that fort is surrounded, and then he sends later ki Shankarji Narayan will surrender. And but now Shankarji Narayan, as he has taken an oath to be loyal to Tarabai, he was in a dilemma, and that person he commits suicide, and that is a very big in fact. How he is back, and then he takes his son service, Naro Shankar. He was made secretary. So Shah was having that kind of nature, who always tried to reconcile, and that is what happened to the large number of Maratha Sardar. Now, after this battle of Khed, large number of forts they surrendered to Shahu, uh, and Tarabai she gave responsibility to fight from Satara to Parshuram Panta. Parshuram Pratinidhi, who ran away from the battle of was at Satara, and Sat invested. Sat was attacked by Shahu, and Satara Pratinidhi, Parshuram Panta Pratinidhi, he was fighting, and the in charge of the fort was Sheikh Mira. Shahu had played a trick now. Shahu he finds out that Sheikh Mira belongs to which village, and then he captures his family, brings them on the battlefield, and says that if the fort is not surrendered, your family will be blown away. Sheikh Mira, he asked Pratinidhi, please surrender the fort now, otherwise my family is going to be blown away, and in any case, we are not going to win against the forces of Shahu. Pratinidhi was not willing to surrender, and now the Sheikh Mira, he himself arrests Pratinidhi. Pratinidhi was put in the custody and the fort was surrendered. And now Shahu, he occupies fort, and then again his position as Chhatrapati. His fort now Satara, now here on capital of the capital of Shahu. Shahu remained at Satara, and he made new appointment like Bhairav Mureshwar was made Peshwa. Uh, Dhanaji Jadhav remains Senapati. Taro Shankar, remember his father has committed suicide, becomes Sachiv. Then Balkrishna Dev, he becomes Amatya. Mahadaji Gadadhar. This you have to memorize. Mahadaji Gadadhar became Sumant. Then Ramchandra Punde became Mantri. Then Honaji Anand became Nayadish. Mahadaji Gadadhar became Pandit Rao, and Gadadhar Prahlad became Pratinidhi. Now, Shahu in his administration, he made changes now. Shivaji was against giving the zamindari, watandari. He was in favor of giving the regular salary, but Shahu was forced by the circumstances to to give watandari, and this has created a kind of competition for acquiring more and more watan among the Marathas, and this has remained important weakness among the Maratha administration. But nevertheless, Shahu was forced by the circumstances. In any case, watandari system has already started before him during the period of Rajaram itself. Rajaram has given watan to the Maratha Sardar and asked them to conquer those watans. Those watans were in the Mughal territory. So watandari has already started, and this is how we learn about the succession of Shahu. So we need to understood it the chronological sequence that Shahu, who was in the custody of Aurangzeb, he was brought up there. He was released after the death of Aurangzeb, and Tarabai, who was widow of Rajaram, was leading the Marathas. She was not willing to let the reins of hand go from her hand. And Shahu comes to Maharashtra. He established himself at Ahmednagar, and his diplomatic assistant like Balaji Vishwanath. He convinced too many people that it is the Shahu who is the legitimate Chhatrapati, and many people they turn in favor of Shahu, and the very important person who turned in favor of Shahu at the crucial moment is Dhanaji Jadhav, and it was in fact Balaji Vishwanath who played a crucial role in turning Dhanaji Jadhav in favor of Shahu. So at the Battle of Khed, which was fought in October 1707, 12th October, Shahu wins the war, and he becomes now Chhatrapati, legitimizes his position, and in January 1708 he captures the fort of Satara, and after that, there are certain more events like he establishes his court, and that is how Shahu succeeds as Chhatrapati to the Marathas. So this first topic, that is succession of Shahu, is over now. Do you have any doubt in this?